This is StormReel, a podcast about the intersection of people and weather, hosted by storm chasers Jeremy Hamann and me, Gabe Cox.
Welcome to StormReel, the podcast about the intersection of people and weather. I am your host, Jeremy Hamann, joined by my fellow host, Gabe Cox. Hey, Gabe, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. Excited about this show.
Yeah.
Got a fun guest.
Absolutely. A great guest today. Something we talk about a lot on this podcast, Gabe, is being the one friend in the friend group that people reach out to about severe weather, if there's severe weather around them.
Oh, yeah.
I had a fun experience yesterday. My good buddy Alex back in Nebraska, we're on a group chat and text back and forth quite a bit, and he sent some pretty awesome photos of being underneath a supercell out in Burwell, Nebraska. So that's kind of like north central Nebraska. And him and his family were going camping. Oh. And he was like, I don't think camping is going to happen. And I was like, oh no, where are you at? And I pull up my radar scope, of course. I locate Nebraska, and he is under the sole tiny tornado warning in the middle of the state. Gosh. I was like, of course that would happen. Like when you're out camping with your family, trying to like get on the water.
Right.
And it was, I don't think there was anything confirmed in terms of tornadic activity. But it was a beast of a supercell, and it was really stationary too. It stood there for just like hours and hours and hours.
Was the next photo a picture of his tent floating down a valley?
I mean, honestly, thankfully it moved along after a couple hours, and he said they had a really beautiful night, and everything cleared off, and they could even see the Milky Way. But it was just like, oh no, my friend is underneath a huge supercell. Some really beautiful photos though of kind of the whale's mouth feature of the cell. Shout out to Alex and his family. And
way to intercept with a tent.
Yes,
I love it.
Truly. I think they were trying to kayak, so that would even be more impressive to intercept in a kayak. Not recommended.
Flip that thing over and you've got your hail shield.
Yeah, that's not bad. Awesome. Well, let's bring in our guest. We got a ton to talk about with this amazing guest. And this week, our guest, it's safe to say, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, is one of the world's most prolific storm chasers. He's been actively chasing severe weather for well over 10 years. His footage has been seen on every conceivable broadcast outlet. And in 2025, this year, he was named Chaser of the Year at the National Storm Chaser Summit in Kansas, coming to us live a day after a successful tornado intercept in Oxbow, Saskatchewan, Canada. Welcome to the show, Aaron Rigsby. How you doing, Aaron?
Oh, guys, it's good to be here. You know, we were talking about this before we came on. It's kind of funny that the last time that we tried this, it was also in a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. And now we're back again in the middle of a truck stop in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota. So we're coming full circle.
That's
and
right.
Gosh, I feel like so much has happened in the last 3 years. Like, I feel like it's just a totally different person since then, but in all of the right ways.
Yeah, 100%, man. And coming off of an international tornado intercept, like... You're on a high right now. I can see it on your face. I love it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was a grind of all grinds. It's been a minute since I've grinded like that, and let me tell you, 31 is definitely letting me know it's not too happy like when it was 22.
For sure, we can relate with that. Absolutely. Well, let's just talk about the thing that's on the front of mind. Tell us about that chase, where you started from, how you had to haul it across an international border, and what the intercept was like.
Yeah, so I'm going to back things up actually a little bit, because this whole week started, I was originally making my way back to Colorado to kind of have some downtime for this, the high plains kind of lit up. So I went back to Colorado. I ended up, one of my friends, as I was passing through on my way up to Montana to take some pictures up there, hit me up about going to a concert. So I stopped in Denver, went to a concert, got like 3 hours of sleep, drove up to Montana, and was taking pictures of some okay storms up there. I missed a really good one in Oklahoma while I was up there. And then after Montana, I turned around and then I drove overnight and I got like another 3 or 4 hours of sleep in Rapid City, kept going down to Nebraska, ended up documenting an hour-long stationary tornado there. And then the next day went to Kansas, chased Kansas, got on a tornado warning storm there, left Kansas at like 6 p.m., drove again overnight on a few hours of sleep to southern Illinois, and then chased Illinois. And then some of my friends started like talking about Canada, and I have a few buddies that are up there, and he's just like, you got to get up to Canada. And I was like, dude, that is literally 17 hours. There's no way that I'm doing that. Well, the chase ended early enough to where I was like, okay, like just out of curiosity, let me start looking at Canada. And then I started looking at models. And I was like, okay, I'm tired, but like, I can at least just make my ground north to see how far I get it's like, just to give me a fighting chance if something looked silly.
Yeah.
So before you know it, it's like 3 or 4 in the morning and I'm rolling through Minneapolis, Minnesota, still trucking along just fine. Like I still feel pretty good. I got some late night friends up and, we're chatting, they're keeping me awake. And then I pulled off for probably a 2 or 3 hour nap, and then slowly made my way up to Fargo and was just not feeling it at all. I was like, it's not a marginal day, but it's like just marginal enough. I didn't think that the moisture was going to get up there, but the temperatures were low enough to where I'm like, it's still, under a 20-degree spread. So maybe I almost made a catastrophic mistake. I was in Fargo, North Dakota. I made it there and I was just sitting there and I was even looking at hotels and I was like, maybe I'll just take the day off and, just catch up on rest. And then, I got to like just thinking about it more. I'm like, I already drove all night up here. I'm like, if I get a hotel here and something silly happens, like I'm going to be more mad than if I was sitting in Illinois. So I kicked myself into gear, continued driving north, crossed over into Manitoba. And like the International Border Patrol is always so funny when storm chasers come through because they're like, what's your purpose up here? And I was like, I'm going to be chasing storms in a little bit here. And they always look at you like, it's cool, but then they're always like, they always kind of have this like dumbfounded look on their face. And he was just like, how long are you going to be here for? And I looked down and I'm like, about 7 hours or so. And then I'm going to cross back over. And so, I cross into Manitoba and I'm just driving and driving and driving. And mind you, like Manitoba and Saskatchewan are way different than storm chasing in the States because it is so rural. Like there was 100+ miles that I went without even coming across a town or a gas station.
Wow.
And at this point, the storm also formed like 3 hours earlier than what it was expected to be. So I just kept trekking west, crossed over into Saskatchewan and got on this storm. And when I first got on it, it looked like it was really stable and it did not look very good. And like, there was kind of one of those like distant wall cloud looking things where it wasn't rotating. It was more of just kind of like a lowering, but it looked kind of outflowy. So it didn't really look that good. And as I got closer to Oxbow, Saskatchewan, where this tornado ended up touching down just south of there, it ended up really ramping up. Like I had to get gas and, I'm pumping my gas and I can just see it rotating over there. And I'm like, please wait. Cause this year's been frustrating. It's been like, I've seen a lot of tornadoes, but they've been so frustrating to get close to. And I've just been like pulling up like last second, like right as they touch down. I'm like, please wait. I need a close range intercept this year.
Yeah.
And so Lord and behold, I pump my gas, pepper back out of there, and I start driving south of town, and that's when the tornado touches down. And already I was excited because it was really rewarding, but it was interesting because it almost looked like a land spout at first. And then it did kind of what Nebraska did the other day and turned into a hybrid tornado where it like developed a mesocyclone. I think what happened was that the first updraft attempt, it got undercut by the outflow boundary, but then another updraft went up right on it. And then that's what ended up producing the tornado. But it was so photogenic, man. It was a long snaky rope tornado with like a big dust column underneath of it. It was so pretty with the blue background. But when it got really cool was I was coming in from the north, so there's just tennis ball size hail falling all around me. I'm like, the grind was worth it. And some of my friends, I can't reply to them, but they're texting me because I was just like telling them about this haul that I made. And they're like, well, I see it was already worth it. I'm like, yeah, it was. Awesome. And I'm making my way. The long snaky tornado is about to cross my dirt road. And I was like, okay, this is time to intercept. This is my close range opportunity. But when I got up there, I was like, maybe 50 to 100 yards away because it looked like it was kind of on its way out, and it was like that snaky rope, and it was like kind of like a broader circulation. But then when I got up on it, it ramped back up. So you can actually see it in my GoPro video that was mounted on the roof, that it's kind of like this, I don't want to say it's weak, but it's like a slower rotating column. And then all of a sudden you just see it really start to ramp up and tighten. And then it starts throwing debris, hay bales and oil things that are flying around. But then it started to retrograde a little bit back to me. And I got absolutely blasted by like easily over 100-mile-an-hour inflow jet winds. And I've been in, like Gabe can attest for this, we've been in hurricanes before, and I've been in vehicles with winds well over 100 miles an hour. The winds were so strong, it blew my mirrors toward the tornado, ripped the cap off of the back of one of them, and the pebbles were being driven so strongly that there's now like cracks in my mirror and the back of my GoPro because the wind was so strong. And it was the first time in a while I actually had to back up a little bit. Not that I was in like imminent danger, but I was like, okay, it's clearly expanding and clearly on this road. So I'm backing up, filming the tornado, not realizing it either because I'm like looking behind me to make sure there's not like a scared local behind me, but I'm backing up, filming, and I'm like half doing it with like my knee while filming the tornado on this like dirt road. And then it finally crosses. And then, you know, it was like, it turned into kind of like a wide, broad dusty circulation with a rainbow on the side of it. And then afterwards I ran into one of my buddies, Brandon, and we were just like, it was worth it, because they took the grind up from Illinois as well. It was so awesome, man. That was it was like, it wasn't like tornado of a century. It was just a fun, amazing chase.
Oh, I get that. Yeah, that's awesome. And you got your close range intercept, as your mirror can now tell everybody.
Yeah, sure did.
I love that, man. That's so fun. That's the best feeling too, like to put in that much work and for it to pay off. And it just goes to show, like, if you love sleep, storm chasing's not your thing, because you're going to have to put in some long grinds, especially if you do it solo.
Dude, and the solo grinding is brutal sometimes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It can wear on you for sure, man. That's awesome. And I love, you alluded to the fact that you and I have been in hurricanes. Let's see, 2018 was the first hurricane chase that you and I, first chase period that you and I had together. It was my first major hurricane, ended up being a Category 5 hurricane, which you and I did not expect going into it. But it's safe to say that event solidified both your and my career in storm chasing. We just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Couldn't have planned it any better if we needed to. And that just kind of blew open the door in both our careers. But it's been super fun watching yours blossom from there. And just like you mentioned, in the last 3 years, stuff has taken off even more. So it's been really fun, man, watching your career blossom. Getting Storm Chaser of the Year at Storm Chaser Summit was so awesome to see. Give us like a little backstory to how you even got into it, and kind of what that journey's been like for you, especially doing it solo and just kind of having to, you're making it all come together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start off by saying too, it's been that Hurricane Michael in particular was a really cool experience just for our friendship, because like you said, I feel like that's when both of our careers started to blossom, and it was like cool to be able to witness each other kind of take off from there and share that, you know, special chase with each other. So that was really cool.
Absolutely.
But man, I tell you, we've had some long conversations about this. It has not been an easy run. So long story shorter, we'll take up the whole hour just talking about this. But it basically, my biggest fear turned into my biggest passion, especially when a tornado hit my hometown. It was a weak one, but a tornado hit my hometown back in 2010. And people ask me all the time, I really don't know what it was about that moment, but I guess just seeing the damage that they could do firsthand and like the storms roll through that night just ignited the fire and, you know, kind of told me that I want to start chasing storms. Because at the time I was just taking lightning pictures. I was starting to get into photography and, you know, starting to face my fears, I guess, a little bit. And after that night, it was just off to the races. And in 2012, I took my first trip to the plains with some friends, because at the time there was like no chasers in Ohio. It was like me and like 2 or 3 other people. That was not a thing in Ohio when I first started. And now it's, you know, kind of all over the place. But, you know, I took my first trip to the plains in 2012 and I started to learn the basics of forecasting. And just each year we would take what we call a chasecation, and it would be like a week or 2 out of the year. And we would hope that we throw a dart and hit a bullseye. And each year I tried to learn something new, and you take that and span it over the course of now 15 years of storm chasing. Ouch. It hurts to say that out loud. It's been able to help me blossom, you know, my career into what it is today. But one of my friends, basically, he got me hired at a warehouse, and obviously I was working my butt off. I was working, I think, 4 12-hour days at the time and having, 2 or 3 days off at a time. And in theory, that sounds great for storm chasing, but until all of the days seem to happen on the days that you're working and not the 3 days that you have off. And then, basically just after a while that I got so tired of missing stuff. In 2015, I was taking more and more trips back and forth in the planes, but then having to grind it back all night to get back to work in time. And people would start taking bets on if I would actually make it back in time to make it for my shift. And I tell you, I did. I never missed a shift because of storm chasing at the time. But it was basically setting the stage for, what eventually was my career today, because I got tired of missing everything. I really wasn't happy at the warehouse I was working. It was just so repetitive, and, it didn't feel quite right. So I told myself, I'm going to save up a cushion. And I've always been drawn to kind of the nomadic lifestyle, with van life and just kind of living life on the road. And I'm going to combine this nomadic lifestyle with what I want my career to be, because at the time people were doing it. It wasn't many, but there were people making a living off of chasing. And I'm like, okay, it's not impossible like everybody is telling me, because there's literally people doing it right now. And one of my good friends, Brandon Clement, he's been kind of my mentor over the years. And I always appreciate him kind of seeing something in me, because at the time he was one of my biggest idols, because he was doing storm chasing full time, and he was really good at it. He was really good at what he does. He was really great at storytelling, really great at drone work. And he was nice enough to take me under his wing and give me a lot of advice to follow on this journey. And that same, or I believe it was the following year, it may have been the same year, was when Hurricane Michael happened. And that's when we got that really viral shot, and it catapulted us into the media world, where people like storm chasers knew who we were. But at the time, media was just like, oh, who are these guys? Like like, what the heck just happened here with this shot? And then, that kind of got a couple of really good opportunities. And then in 2019, 2020, I moved out to Colorado with a couple of my friends, and was like, okay, I'll just kind of like work retail for a little bit and cover my bills, and then I'll be able to like storm chase outside of that. Well, long story short, that all completely collapsed, and I basically was just like went broke and had to move home for a little bit. And I looked at my dad, and this is probably the year, I think it was toward the end of 2020. I told him that I was like, I'm just going to get back to a warehouse job and, call it quits and storm chase when I can. And he looked at me and he was like, if you do that, I'll support you, but do it because it's what you want to do, and don't do it because it's what you think that you have to do. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I'm in my mid-20s, so I'm in a weird spot where I'm like, God, I'm 24 and I just moved back home to Ohio after living in my dream place for a year, and now I'm broke and going right back to a warehouse where I was. But at that moment, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was teaching me a really important lesson, that it's okay to fail. And honestly, it's encouraged to fail at something at times. Because if you listen to any successful person, a lot of people that idolize like Alex Honnold and a lot of these extreme athletes and other storm chasers, at some point in their life, they were doing the nomad thing that I was doing. Some of them living out of a Honda Civic at the time, going broke, having these really difficult journeys leading up to their success. So, 25-year-old Aaron at the time, I was getting taught a really valuable lesson. And I think that my dad saying that was almost like kind of the universe telling him to tell me that I needed to go through this in order to appreciate what was to come and to keep that work ethic that I, was starting to develop. And so I ended up getting hired back at my original warehouse job. I saved up double what I did the first time, and I went back at it with storm chasing and really started to have some momentum moving. I was starting to figure out how to shoot things. I was starting to figure out how to tell stories. I was starting to make a name for myself. And I started doing this routine where basically in the fall and winter, I was living out of my car, bed still built in the back, and I would get hired at warehouses in the fall and winter, and then I would take a leave in the spring and summer. So I would basically just work 80 plus hours a week in the off season. In the last few years, I haven't had to go back to a warehouse job. And honestly, some exciting news as far as the career goes is that if I really wanted to, if I didn't love this nomad life so much and just being on the go, I would be able to afford to live on my own in my own apartment right now in Oklahoma if I really wanted to, which has just been so surreal to like even consider, because I'm just so used to roughing it. And I kind of joke around with people that now I stay in a lot of hotels because I feel like it's the one thing that I've like earned after like just slogging it for so many years and like being a total grease monkey. So it's like I hit diamond status at Hilton the other day, and I'm like, whoa. I feel like the weirdest nomadic hippie right now, just to where I've come from. But man, it's like It's like, jokes aside though, it's like, it's nice to be able to do that, but also if you're gonna do storm chasing full time, you have to stay in hotels every once in a while, or else you are not going to get enough sleep, and eventually that's going to start affecting your work.
Yeah, you will
and
burn
then
out.
Your work will start slipping, and then you're so worn out that you just don't make decisions like you usually do.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, Jeremy and I have both been in that position where it's like, hey, we've been sleeping in the car, like let's get a hotel and
get a shower.
Yeah, get a shower. 2023 was the first season where I was regularly getting hotels, like you said, like earning that level, like I'm making enough now that I can get a cheap hotel at least and get some sleep and get a shower, and that's a game changer. It's like you level up at that point as a storm chaser. It's so fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, that's so fun, and hearing your story. And we actually had, so you came into town this past fall. You and I went to a techno and house music festival for 3 days, which was super fun. But we had a moment where we were kind of just catching our breath and hydrating, sitting at a picnic table in the middle of all three of these stages. And we both were kind of in a reflective mood and just talking about like, yeah, we put in a ton of work, but it was a lot of recognizing opportunities that came our way and not being afraid to take them, and realizing like we did a lot. You obviously have to put one foot forward, but there was a lot that's out of our control. And I think we were both just sitting there super thankful, like, wow, like these opportunities came our way. Like we had zero control over them. But it was so cool that we were in a place to be able to grab onto that. And it was just such a cool conversation, encouraging. Do you remember the guy that was sitting next to us ended up giving us a hug? He's like, man, that was a beautiful conversation. I hope you don't mind that I was great, listening.
Dude. Yeah. It was, and like we were like totally sober too. Like we weren't even like having one of those like buzzed moments where we're like, having the lovey bro conversation. It just like happened so naturally. It was great.
Yeah. But it's such an important thing to point out too, like for both of us, like life handed us opportunities and we had to make a decision. Like we're at a crossroads at every decision to say like, is it responsible to take this? Or like, I'm going to grab onto this and ride it and see what happens. And it's been so cool to see what has happened with you as you held on to those and just propelled yourself forward.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And like, I feel like I get really sentimental talking about stuff like this because there's so many opportunities that if I looked back on and I didn't do, it probably would have changed the entire trajectory of not only like my career, but my entire early to late 20s. I mean, I really kind of like how we were talking about, I really feel like storm chasing is what I was born to do. Like talking to so many people now, and especially like talking to people for a living, it's to be able to find a passion. There's a big difference between a passion and a hobby. Mm-hmm. A passion is something that you set everything aside for, give it 110% to make it happen. And a hobby, which is totally fine either way, those that want storm chasing as a hobby or a career. But there's a big fine line on that. And a lot of the people that are going to be listening to this, especially the younger generation of storm chasers that are so passionate about storm chasing, I want you to listen to this, and I want Gabe and I, and even Jeremy, to lead by example on that. It's like just chasing the impossible and recognizing cards laid out in front of you. It's never written on a big billboard or served on a platter. It's very subtle stuff that you look at and you're like, that's kind of weird. In all of the right ways possible. I mean, even a prime example, man, like I was working at the warehouse for Hurricane Ian, and I had just started that warehouse and I was already putting my job on the line by doing whatever I had to do to get down to Florida. If I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have worked with my good buddy Max to get that storm surge probe shot that ended up going super viral, providing so many opportunities. Now that video now, even like, so for those that don't know, Max made these storm surge probes and we captured storm surge in a way that had never been seen possible in Fort Myers Beach, Florida. Yeah. That video now is going to be in the Smithsonian Museum, Smithsonian Museum.
No way. That's amazing.
So if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have had these opportunities to be able to do that. And who knows, like maybe even Max wouldn't have gotten that shot because it was our two minds working together to put it where it was and like make that happen. So it's just, if I wouldn't have done that, who would have known, who knows what my career would have done at that point? It probably would have still been, chugging along or like kind of flopping along, but like it was a real big turning point at that point. And you have to decide when it's worth to take the risk and bet on yourself. And that's essentially what I feel like I did my entire 20s, is that I was just taking these gambles, at a very calculated level and betting on myself. And it's starting to pay off finally, even into my early 30s.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's amazing.
And we'll link to that video in the show notes for sure for people to take a look at.
Iconic.
Yeah, seriously, that's incredible. That's incredible. Aaron, you mentioned in your earlier story, and we hear this so often in the stories of folks who become fascinated with severe weather and extreme circumstances generally, is that there's this early sort of seed that lives inside of us. We maybe sometimes call it like a latent gene that turns on or something, but it's initially composed of fear, and primarily of fear of the unknown, of the extreme, of the things that are out of our control. But it kind of flips into like attraction, right? So there's like this two sides of the same coin of like repulsion and attraction, and they can turn on and off. How do you think about that now in your life, and as you continue to move towards extreme events? Is there anything still inside of you that feels fear? Obviously, you're still a human being, but do you have that little nugget inside of you still, or do you feel pretty comfortable moving towards extreme events?
So it's an interesting perspective change, because I think that fear a lot of times comes from things that we don't understand. And then I think that there's a different type of fear where I can be super confident and comfortable storm chasing, but there is like flight versus fear is a real thing, because it's natural for a human to be in a dangerous situation to want to get out of it. Yeah. And now I am very comfortable on the approach of storm chasing, but there's always that voice in the back of my head, and especially in my brain, where it's telling you that you're in a dangerous situation and you have to fight off the urge to want to get out of that situation. But I also tell people that if I'm in a situation to where I am genuinely fearful, then I made a severe miscalculation somewhere. So it's a very different fear perspective from young Aaron versus older Aaron. And, especially with, different types of hurricanes, or even like the situation yesterday, I wasn't scared when the tornado was starting to like expand a little bit. I recognized and backed up, but there was always that thought in the back of my mind where your adrenaline is pumping and your brain is like, hey, there's a thing that can literally kill you right there. You should probably get out of the way. So it's been interesting, the two different fear perspectives of that. And I get asked a lot, especially from people that like don't know who I am, like, oh, do you ever get scared, or like, are you ever fearful for your life? I'm not going to say it's never happened, but if that happens in this day and age in my chasing career, it's because I made a severe miscalculation, or something that I didn't account for went very wrong. But it's also important on that note to, if you do get into a scary situation or genuinely fearful, to collect yourself, get those emotions under control to where you don't make a bad situation even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like we talked about before, right? When your battery is low, right? You've had, several nights of bad sleep, that calculation can run a little bit slower, and risk taking can, take precedent, I guess. Hey, dear listener, storm chasing and podcasting both cost money. And now that Gabe and I are back making podcasts regularly, we have a new way that you can support our show. If you look in the show notes, you'll see a link to be able to subscribe to our podcast. This will cost you $5 a month, and you will be rewarded with early access to our podcasts. You'll get each episode 2 days early as a $5 a month subscriber, and we will read your name on the podcast. This support means the world to us. We take our time out of our regular lives to make these episodes, and so just a little extra support would really, really mean the world to us. Thank you so much for listening and considering subscribing. That's super interesting. I'm just so fascinated always of folks like you who have so much experience on the ground of forecasting, of getting near severe weather, what that calculation looks like and feels like these days. It's super, super fascinating and interesting and unique, because there's just so few people like you who have been near so many tornadoes and hurricanes and extreme weather events like that. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's also interesting too, because there, on the subject of fear, there's also times too where I'm not even fearful for my own life, or like I'm not necessarily afraid of the storm. I'm afraid for people. The Rolling Fork a couple years ago was a situation like that. You can hear my voice, like the tone of my voice, get really high pitched, and it's because I knew the caliber of that tornado was capable of, and how close it was going to come through town. And like, it's a pretty helpless feeling fearful and not being able to knock on every door and let people know what's coming their way. So it's a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who don't know, can you tell us the Rolling Fork story and your experience in that storm?
Yeah, so essentially, it was at night in the Mississippi Delta. Rolling Fork, Mississippi is a little town that sits just east of the Mississippi River, what we call the Delta region. It's a very flat area of Mississippi. And basically, I watched this tornado form from a small cone. It went rain wrapped for maybe 5 minutes or so. And I was like, okay, well, that was our view, I guess. Well, when it came back out of the rain, it had doubled in size, was so incredibly violent that you could just hear the roar well before it was close enough or even hitting anything. And it had what we call horizontal vortices just rolling underneath of the main tornado. And off to my right, you can see city lights. And seeing and hearing that tornado, you hear a genuine fear in my voice of concern, because I knew it was going to be a close call. Now, when the tornado passed by, it looked like it might have missed town just to the north. And I have big LED lights on the side of my car specifically for the reason of search and rescue if it's needed. So when I came through Rolling Fork, I had my lights on and I wasn't seeing anything. I'm like, okay, I think it missed town. But then out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glance of a damaged house. And I was like, okay, I was like, go check on them. It wasn't too severe, and, make sure that everybody's okay. When I turned my car forward down the street, the reason I wasn't seeing anything reflect off my lights is because there was nothing left. It had just leveled this section of town. And we ended up going into search and rescue for over an hour because it hit the fire station, it hit the police department, and it hit the doctor's office there, and it immediately cut off their resources. And this region is very sparse. So the nearest fire department was either down in Vicksburg or up in Greenville. And that's at least a 45-minute drive in both directions when your immediate resources are cut off. So we were literally pulling people out of houses, buried under their homes, refrigerators on top of their roofs. Gosh. And it just put a whole new perspective on me ever since then of how fragile life can be, and really motivates me, because there's always a bunch of controversy of like why people are out there. Like, like, are you saving lives? Are you providing science? Are you just an adrenaline junkie? And it put just a whole new perspective on, even for me, chasing for as many years as I have, of how fragile life can be and what these things can do. And it's a harsh reminder of things that we can get excited for when they intersect with humanity. They can turn people's lives upside down, but there's a certain satisfaction of that, because that night I genuinely felt like I did everything right as a storm chaser, where I put the cameras aside, seconds matter. We're literally pulling people out of their homes. And if I or the other storm chasers weren't there, who knows what the results could have been if that time had passed by for emergency responders to get there. You just never know.
Yeah. Yeah, and there were several chasers that were there with you, and it was kind of like, there's healthy competition in the storm chasing world, but in those moments, like putting all that aside, banding together, and it was really, there's actually a really powerful moment at the Storm Chaser Summit a couple years ago where storm chasers and victims got up on stage to share these stories, and it was super moving, super powerful. I think everybody in the crowd was crying at one point. And just so cool to see the storm chasing community come together under those conditions and do what's right, and that it had profound impacts on the community. Like, lives were saved that night.
Absolutely. And that's something that you never forget as a chaser either. You can't unsee that stuff, but you also, and again, this is kind of toward the younger crowd, you have to prepare yourself to potentially be in a situation like that, because if you storm chase long enough, you're going to come across that at some point in your life, if not worse.
Yeah. Wow.
100%. Yeah. And you just as a person who is drawn to extreme situations and comfortable in those environments, and when you go through something like that, does it stick with you? Does it stay with you? How do you cope personally with seeing kind of firsthand the destruction that can occur in people's lives?
Well, so I kind of want to approach this in a couple different directions, because one, it's really incredible on what you can become accustomed to, and also with the coping mechanism, it's interesting how stuff can like kind of just slowly creep up on you, because I feel like in instances with Rolling Fork, obviously I have a bunch of adrenaline pumping and, you know, you don't have any time to process what actually happened that night. But there's always like with extreme events, such as, at least for me, with the Marshall wildfire, Hurricane Helene, and Rolling Fork, those are my top three kind of events that have left an everlasting impact on me, is that there's just small things that you start to creep up on you when you don't even realize it, like months after the event. Like sometimes you'll just have like random anxiety episodes, or I'll like, you know, when I'm on the road by myself, you'll start like having flashbacks or like having a bad feeling of like coming across, you know, like, am I going to come across fatalities today while I'm out storm chasing? It's all these really small things that you start to recognize that start to build up. And I don't want to say necessarily become a problem, but something that you need to talk about. Because when you go through a traumatic event like that, I'm not saying that you have to get a therapist, but just like, I feel like just getting out loud how you feel and like what you went through that night and like what you saw, just getting it out there and having an ear to genuinely listen to is very important and part of the coping process. Because like there's a common misunderstanding that storm chasers are just a bunch of adrenaline junkies, and that's not the case, especially for, you know, people like me who have been in literally the worst of the worst disasters. Like, I'm a human. Like, there's times I have to walk off to the side and tear up a little bit, or I get caught in, you know, this thing where I want to help every single person, but I can't. I mean, instances like Hurricane Helene, I covered that for a month and a half before I finally had to tell myself that it's like, I feel like the job is done. You're not going to be able to help everybody. And at some point, you're going to have to pull out of there for your mental health's sake. And then the other perspective of it is that it's interesting what you can become accustomed to, because there's been times where I've had new people with me, or I just come across some random locals and they talk about damage. You know, maybe it's from like an EF2 or EF3 tornado. They're like, I've never seen anything like this. This is so horrible. And it's like for me, someone like me, I'm unfazed only because I've just seen so much in my career that it's like, oh yeah, I mean, like, this is bad, but like it could be way worse. But for a lot of folks, they've never seen anything like that. So it's just interesting what as a storm chaser and a journalist and chasing all the time, you become accustomed to, or like, you know, being so calm in certain situations, especially after a town has taken a direct hit. You don't necessarily go into freak out mode. You almost take charge. There was even at one point the same night of Rolling Fork where I wasn't being a jerk. It was just, my brain was like, okay, this needs done. So I'd be like, you go there, I'm going to go here, rendezvous here.
You said some great things about, you know, traumatic events and going through those and the process of, and how important it is to talk through those things. I think people who are listening right now, you know, that's just such an important message to hear, that it doesn't make you weak to need to process these things. It just makes you human. And you don't even have to go through like a natural disaster to have a traumatic event happen to you in your life. And it's not weakness to have to process. It's purely that you have a human mind and a human nervous system that needs to process those things. So that's a really great message. Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. And you can be the strongest person on the face of planet Earth, but eventually that stuff becomes too heavy for even anybody. And that's coming from someone like me that has struggled about talking about even problems outside of traumatic experiences and chasing. And I can't tell you how much better I feel when I just get something off my chest. And that sounds so simple and so basic to say on here, but trust me when I say it helps to just blurt it out to somebody. Even if they don't say anything or give you the advice that you want or the answer that you want, just blurt it out and tell someone about it.
Absolutely. It's a great thing and to be reminded of, even for myself. Like I often find myself just in normal everyday situations and the block comes in of like, oh, they don't want to hear this. Nobody wants to hear this. And it's, I don't know what that is. It's maybe some sort of self-protection happening in my mind. But it's that block, that damming of those thoughts and those emotions that fester and stay with you and do real harm, and maybe even more harm than the event itself. So yeah, talk with someone. If you're out there going through a hard time, it's so important.
Well, and it's interesting that you said that about, you know, no one's going to like care about my problems, because I think we all sometimes get that mentality where, oh, they have their own things to worry about. But if you mention something that you're going through to someone and they maybe unknowingly are going through the same thing, you two have that bond of something to talk about. And that's how you get the ball rolling, is just by getting it out there. Like, yes, we do all have our own problems and like our own demons and our own mental health issues. But if you talking about it to someone gets them through another day, or, you know, just making you or someone else feel like you're less alone, that is so much more important than keeping that stuff bottled up and getting that mental health back on track. And that's another thing too, just like, you know, being on the road so much and storm chasing so much outside of disasters. I mean, family stuff, like relationships, like just talking about this stuff and getting it out there. It just helps you so much in the long run. And it's not a want to do that. At some point, it's going to be a need to talk about stuff like that.
Yeah.
100%.
For sure.
Yeah. 100%. I would love to talk about, Aaron, you're getting awarded Storm Chaser of the Year this year, man. Like, tell me about that whole process. How did you find out that you were getting this award? What was the ceremony like? And what did just that mean to you as a person who's put in so much work into this passion and this job?
Well, I tell you, man, 2024 was just next level. So last year was a year that I have only heard about growing up in my chasing career, because in like the 90s and like early 2000s growing up, I would hear all about these, you know, crazy years for tornadoes and just all of these, you know, crazy intercepts that used to happen. And when I started my career, like really started storm chasing, it was like record low year, record low year, record low year. And when you're trying to build a career out of continuous record low years, that is an extremely difficult process to go to.
Yeah.
And 2024, I feel like, was the one year where everything came together. Everything was extreme. I had all of the right cameras to do it. And it was the year that would put all of the skills that I've spent so many years over learning to the ultimate test. And I feel like I passed. And when I got that award, it was almost like that was like my certificate of completion of like, okay, you did it. You proved yourself worthy. Now the rest of your career can really snowball from here. But it was really crazy though, because 2024, it drilled me into the ground though, because I was so exhausted and so tired, because it was pretty much from April 26th onward, it was just nonstop with everything. If you got a down day in between tornadoes, there was an historic solar storm that you would get up for. And then as soon as July rolled around, which is usually the time that I have to catch my breath, the Hurricane Beryl happened on July 4th. And in between all of that, I hit a deer with my old car. So I totaled my other vehicle, having to buy a vehicle in the process and still be chasing storms in between. But it really, I think the thing that I loved most about getting that award, and it's an interesting perspective, because I feel like early on in entering the chasing world, I was really all about like big get-togethers and meeting everybody and yada, yada, yada. And now my view has changed a little bit, not necessarily in a bad way, but just like I just kind of avoid it. And I just am so focused on my work and my core group of friends that I've developed over the years that it's usually not my thing. But I was told that I was at least nominated for it. And when you're nominated for it, they like you to be there, because if you end up winning it, then it makes the ceremony that much more special. So I was like, it's in February. Okay, cool. Did not at all expect that to actually win. And the feeling that I had just standing on stage, because the other storm chasers that were up there were like Justin Drake, Simon Brewer, and all these other people that I've like grown up watching, Jeff Petrowski. Like, if you would have told me, young Aaron, that there'd be a day that I was standing on a stage at a Storm Chaser Summit in front of hundreds of people, nominated for Storm Chaser of the Year alongside those guys, I would have looked at you like you were out of your mind. So that was a really surreal experience to share that with them and win it. But I think the thing that makes it so special that I was going to get at, I got a little off track there, was Hurricane Helene, man. I have never been so invested in a storm in my entire life. And I literally spent a month and a half straight covering that event from Florida up to the Carolinas and to Tennessee. And like just the things that I saw, the people that I talked with, and the amount of effort that I put into not only covering that, but the documentary that I've eventually made over it, telling the story of survivals and just from raw, powerful emotion. It was almost like my way of talking about it to someone without actually talking about it to someone. Mm-hmm. And the way that it came together and how much time and passion I put into that documentary, winning that award, I feel like Helene was like the icing on top of that cake for just how hard I worked that year to be able to tell the story of 2024, not by a particular tornado, but by being on everything and just one day telling people about how crazy this year was. And also, you know, with Hurricane Helene, this was the first time that I had experienced this. And it comes full circle to the Storm Chaser of the Year award, because Hurricane Helene, when I went to the Carolinas, there was no cell service, so no one actually knew how bad it was. There were some reports, there was some videos surfacing, but it was really hard to tell if this was just a couple of hard-hit areas or if this was some catastrophic event that unfolded. And everyone was so focused on Asheville. And if it's one thing that I've learned over the years, is that wherever all the other media outlets go somewhere else. Not to take away anything from Asheville, because it was absolutely catastrophic. But these other little towns through the mountains, being the mountain person that I am, I know what mountains can do. And I'm like, if it's that bad in Asheville, what do these other little towns look like? And every time that I would post a drone shot from these towns, I would get flooded with messages saying thank you for posting this, because we didn't know how bad it was. And I had a few messages come through that unfortunately people saw that their house wasn't there anymore, or that their house was there. And I felt like I was leading the story on that, because whenever I'd post like my video from Chimney Rock, the news would be there the next day and I'd already be on to the next one. It was just like staying ahead of them the entire time and just building this entire timeline of events, of showing the true magnitude of what Hurricane Helene had, that you can't do from standing in the same spot and just doing live shots over and over again and getting the stories just from that one location. So to have that recognized, especially in the world of storm chasing we live in, where there are literally thousands of super talented storm chasers that just get incredible shots and are on incredible stuff all the time, to be recognized for that and not only win that was a real special feeling. And just, again, if you would have told me that, because my first conference I ever went to was ChaserCon in 2014 in Denver, Colorado. If you were to tell me that there'd be a day 10 years later to the day that I'd stand on stage and win that award, I mean, it's just the pinnacle of hard work pays off eventually, even if you got to fight for it.
Yeah, man.
So true.
So deserved. Yeah, truly. And speaking of your Helene documentary, we'll link to that as well. It's called The Cries of the Carolinas, an incredible documentary that you put together. And if you just go through the comment section on that thing, like, so many people telling stories of their experience or their family members' experiences. So like, just you putting this together and putting your heart and soul in it and putting it in a public forum, you've allowed people to process their experience as well. That's just an amazing thing that you've done, man. So major props.
And thank you for that too. And I also want to give a little thanks to Gabe too, because honestly, I've picked his brain a lot over the years, because obviously he's very talented at what he does. And that advice was single-handedly how I was able to make that documentary so special and tell it properly and keep people's attention. So shout out to Gabe for that advice over the years too with filmmaking.
I appreciate that, man. And yeah, it is a phenomenal documentary. Your storytelling skills have blossomed in the past few years, along with your storm chasing skills. Like, it's been super fun to watch from a distance and watch all of that grow. And you were recognized for it. Like, people saw the fruit of your labor, and like Jeremy said, like, even the community, and I think you brought up a good point. Like, you made that documentary in a way to process what you had seen and gone through. And I think I can relate to that on different levels with Canton and different things like that. Like, it becomes a way for a storm chaser to process things that they've seen and to just, kind of build this little monument to a period in their life that impacted them deeply. And we've seen this with hurricane footage and stuff like that. It becomes that monument for a lot of other people too. And it becomes a communal event that people can gather around together and process this oftentimes horrific situation that they've gone through together.
Absolutely. And it keeps you that much more motivated to go after the next one, even if it is traumatizing and exhausting to see that stuff. It gives you that motivation to be that lifeline for other people to put together something like that again and be a lifeline for people. That's a really cool feeling that words actually cannot describe. And it makes me feel like I'm doing life right in general, not just doing something for myself, but providing a lifeline and a forum for others to vent and talk about things that they saw, even if it's on an online forum and people can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious, man, as a person who has been in the storm chasing field for as long as you've seen, from where you started to where you are now. I'm sure things have shifted and changed in so many different ways in terms of technology, in terms of just the size and the amount and the volume of storm chasers out there. I would just love to hear what have you seen change kind of in the storm chasing world and community, and where do you see storm chasing going into the future for yourself personally and for the community at large?
Well, that's a good question. It's interesting to see, I guess, the different kind of groups that have formed over the years, because I feel like when I first started, it was strictly storm chasing. Everyone was out there doing, they were just out there to see weather and see video, myself included. But over the years, I've noticed there's almost been like branches kind of start to split off from the original tree trunk that blossomed in the storm chasing world. So now you have, kind of people such as like Gabe and I that are storytellers, and, we like to make documentaries, but we also like to capture weather at an extreme range. Like we want to get the most dramatic shots possible. And then you have still kind of that little branch of people that are just out there to have fun. They kind of go back a little bit. And then you have another branch that of how many storm tours that have popped up over the years. And then now the new thing that's really, I noticed has popped up over the years is the live streamers. Yeah. And it's really like it. I mean, I remember at one point early on, we had like Chaser TV, but it was nothing like it was today. And now a lot of these guys are, live streaming and they're getting thousands and thousands of views. But I think the biggest pivoting point I've seen isn't necessarily directly related to storm chasing, but it's how much of a shift to an online network that we've seen with weather coverage versus normal TV stuff like Weather Channel and all these other stations. They have seen a drastic decrease in viewership, while everyone who has a smartphone now and always watches YouTube have been flooding to what these private accounts that have developed almost like a Weather Channel type system, but for YouTube, and incorporating other storm chasers into it to live stream for them. I think that's been the most dramatic change that I've seen. I know it's not technically storm chasing related, but it is tied into the weather world. And honestly, I think that at some point that'll be the way of the future. And I'm already taking notes on ways to adapt to that change, because right now I do stuff with breaking news networks, and I've already kind of adapted that change where I've changed my priorities of getting my stuff up super quick right away, unless it's something like super insane that I know will be a breaking story. But I have been putting a lot of my tornado stuff aside, and instead of starting to like pump stuff out right away, I'm saving it for like bigger documentaries and stock footage versus for, documentaries in the future with like Nat Geo and Discovery Channel, versus trying to make my main bread and butter out of the breaking news sales. And honestly, there's probably even going to come to a point now where I've built such a following where I start to maybe target sponsorships and stuff to do work for them versus breaking news outlets, and already starting to get a feel for that kind of a change that I'm going to have to adapt to, because that's another thing with freelance and doing this full time. You are never going to sit down and be comfortable. You're going to have to constantly adapt to change. Yep. Things are always changing, and you have to stay on top of it, or you're going to fall right back behind on the path that you just got ahead on. Yeah, it's so true. It's constantly changing, and it can be exhausting, but if you go in knowing to expect that things change, it's like parenthood. I mean, you get into a rhythm with your kids, and then they just change everything. But yeah, it's constantly nonstop chasing. I actually had a conversation with Reed Timmer about this once, and it was just like, you got to adapt. If you don't adapt, your career's dead in the water. Like, people will move on, and that's that. So yeah, it's a lot of work, just to even keep the career alive. You get your rhythm down, and then everything changes. So props to you, man, for keeping up with it. It's a lot of work, and it's a grind just in that regard as well. Yeah, I try my best. It's brutal, man. I don't want to work a routine job, but there's days where I'm like, man, I really wish I had a routine right now. Yeah.
Oh, that's really real. That's really real, I'm sure. Well, something else I wanted to talk about that's interesting about you, man, that's not directly related to storm chasing. You have summited every single Colorado 14er, which is an unbelievable accomplishment. I know some of those summits are crazy and challenging. What was that journey like for you? Why did you want to begin that? And what are some really big highlights from that huge journey? And explain to the audience who might not be familiar with mountaineering terms, what is a 14er? Yeah, so basically a 14er is a mountain that is over 14,000 feet of elevation gain. So 14,000 feet above sea level. So it's incredibly hard to breathe up there. The air is very thin. And honestly, man, the 14er journey really, I didn't set out to do all of them. It just kind of happened. So when I moved to Colorado in 2019, I obviously have loved hiking all to this point, and it's been a super life-changing journey because I was really obese in school, and I lost a bunch of weight by getting into hiking, and it kind of, changed my whole perspective on a lot of things. And,
it gave me the mentality, not only outside of, mountaineering, but to my career in storm chasing, that if I can hike all these crazy mountains, then I can do this, and like I can make this my career. But basically, I started off by just doing a lot of the easier ones because I enjoyed it. I just enjoyed that high of being so high and like working for these views that not a lot of people get to see. But then there came points, when I started to do, and so I'm going to clarify here. So there's different classes of these 14ers. There's class 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So class 1 and 2 are the ones that are basically like a walk. It's a lot of elevation game, but it's nothing super crazy and exposed. Class 3 is when you start to deal with some issues of where you need to wear a helmet because there might be some rock fall above you. Class 4 and 5, literally you can die if you make a wrong move or don't study the route enough. And basically when I got done doing all the class 2s, I'm like, oh, there's no way I can do a class 3. And then I was like, well, like maybe. And then you start doing these class 3 14ers and you're like, okay, there's definitely no way I can do a class 4. That's way too crazy. But then you start getting introduced to people that have done them before and they kind of guide you. And then you start getting this experience and really start studying the routes. And then you do one. And then you're like, okay, there's no way I can do a class 5. I'm literally going to die. And then all of a sudden you take all this experience that you had before and then you study enough. And then you end up climbing a class 5 route up one of these 14ers. And if you listen to a lot of what I said there, there's a lot of similarities to what I just said there into the buildup of my career. And it's like, okay, I can't do this. And then you do it. And you're like, okay, well, if I can do that, I definitely can't do this. There's just this whole gradual buildup. And through this whole 14er journey, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was literally shape shifting my mentality to be able to make storm chasing my career, because it really is. If I can literally climb up these death defying walls of rock, and from someone that grew up with no experience on that, like there's no reason why I can't do a certain goal in storm chasing and, a certain point in my career and, lack the confidence to, send an email out to a sponsorship. So there really was a big tie on that. And like even the weight loss journey, because even the weight loss journey today is still a journey. Like I have my up years and down years. Last year I had a bunch of damage control to do because it was so busy. And with storm chasing full time, I obviously haven't been hiking near as much because I'm always on the go. So it's really, we were talking about adapting to change. I'm adapting to change in more ways than one, even outside of my career, because now I'm having to do the gym more often. I'm having to, run sometimes on the road, or sometimes I just get into ruts and I go 4 or 5 days without exercising. So now I'm having to pay attention extra closely to my diet. But I think it's important to do all these things. And I think it's part of why I use success lightly, because I don't like to use that word sometimes because that makes me feel comfortable. But to some of the, like a little bit of the success that I've had in making storm chasing my career is because I'm never comfortable and I'm always adapting to change. And I've taught myself that and disciplined myself to that, to where I can continue moving with the ocean waves per se, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Every passion that we pursue, it requires discipline. It requires strengthening ourselves and taking care of ourselves so that we can continue to pursue it. Yeah. I'm just so impressed that you summited all 58 14ers, dude. It's incredible, man. It's incredible.
I forgot to add too, the day that I finished the last one was about the same feeling that I had at the Storm Chaser Summit winning Chaser of the Year. It was just like all this stuff that you've worked for right there. You did it. People are celebrating. It was a really cool moment.
Which summit did you finish on?
I finished on Long's Peak, and it was really cool because the day that I finished it with a group of friends, all of which I met on different 14ers throughout my entire journey. I got them all together, different friends I've made on different summits, and we all climbed the last one together.
I love that.
Super cool.
Yeah. What a cool way to wrap it up. I love that so much.
And I also, so at the time too, my mom was actually battling breast cancer, and I dedicated that last mountain to her because she ended up beating breast cancer not long before that. And she also has multiple sclerosis and just has always maintained such a positive attitude and like a positive energy. No matter what she's going through, she always had a smile. And a lot of me on those really tough mountains when I wanted to quit would think of her and like how just daily struggles are, what I take for granted, she would love to be able to do. Yeah. So I dedicated that last mountain to her, and I wore a Snoopy shirt because Snoopy is her favorite, cartoon character. And I dedicated that last mountain to her for getting me through all the 58. So it was a pretty cool moment.
Wow.
That's so awesome. What a powerful moment.
That's incredible. And it's not the hardest one, but it's not the easiest summit either to finish on. So that's awesome. It's a really cool summit. That's one of the 14ers that I've done. So that's a special mountain right there, man. That's really wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, if anyone ever goes to do that, do some of the hard ones first and save a lot of the easy ones for last. When I only had 8 left, they were all like over 15 miles round trip and like 4,000 or 5,000 feet of elevation gain. So,
I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot of parallels like to what you've gone through the last week, you know, journeying throughout the country and into Canada as some of those very early starts to get up and down. Yeah. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us on the StormReel. Is there anywhere, anything online that you'd like to point our listeners towards?
Yeah, you can follow me on any of my socials. I post a lot to my Instagram and Facebook page. Both my Instagram is just my name, Aaron Rigsby. Facebook, Ohio Storm Chasers, because that's where I was born and raised, and I just kept the page name all these years. And then if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's just my name, Aaron Rigsby, and OSC at the end. So Aaron Rigsby, OSC.
Yeah, go check him out. He is like the best storm chasing follow you can possibly follow online. Just so much good content and incredible footage. Yeah, you will not get bored with Aaron's stuff for sure. And we'll post all those links in the show notes as well, along with some of the other content that we talked about in the episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. We really appreciate it. This is a wonderful conversation, and we can't wait to have you back to talk more, man, because we could talk another 8 to 50 hours about all the storms you've encountered.
Absolutely,
man.
yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to StormReel. Please, if you could, rate, review, and subscribe. And if the place you're listening has a little bell or notification tool, hit that too, and so you will know when the next episode of StormReel releases. Thank you to Orograph for the use of our theme song, Metamorism. You can find that song and album streaming everywhere. Find us everywhere online at the StormReel and stormreel.com. For StormReel, I've been Jeremy Hamann, joined by Gabe Cox. We'll talk soon.